Hey, hey, stoked to have everybody together to talk a little authentic masculinity. We've got Diana, David, Jason. Each of you have taken the course and want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about your experience. Have a few questions to kind of dive into and really excited to hear what comes up. So first and foremost, we'll go right in. What would you say is or was your biggest takeaway from the authentic masculinity course?
I can kick us off.
Sure, go ahead.
So, Jesse, thanks for having us. I really enjoyed the Authentic Masculinity course for a couple reasons. In a lot of lately, especially in the past few years, when we talk about very hot button issues, it seems to be that there's an easy polarity, right? You're either for something or against something. And when it comes to things such as women's studies or women's rights, it feels like if you're a feminist, then you're against men. And one of the things that I took away from authentic masculinity is that you can see that there's a spectrum of growth that you can say, yes, men can do better and be, for equivalent treatment for females in the workplace or for in politics or whatever your game is, that you can both recognize that and work on improving yourself, and that these don't have to be opposite sides, that you can do self-work as a man and both support the opposite gender, and those things aren't opposite. Those things aren't conflicting, is what I mean. So I really enjoyed to be able to take this topic of masculinity, which it has this kind of incendiary tone that's anti-female, and be able to expand it and say, no, there's a lot of work that I can do. I can support the other gender. I can better myself. And all these things can coexist at the same time with a positive take. And in the class, in the one that we ran, there was a female in there, and she felt just as much as a part of the discussion. It didn't feel like we were competing or that we had to walk on eggshells or any of that nature. And that was a really, really cool dynamic to be able to talk about that and to feel that I could explore both who I am as far as identifying with a gender. I could see outside perspectives, and that I didn't feel like I was under attack, but that I could also challenge my ideals to do better as a person and support other members of the same gender as well. And I enjoyed that.
Absolutely. Right on.
For me, and if you don't mind, Diane, I'm going to go next. Is that all right with you? Okay, great. So again, thank you, Jesse, so much for inviting me to be a part of this panel with you, because I've done a lot of self development, personal growth over the years, and this was one that really kind of hit a really sensitive button for me, mostly because I'm a pretty big guy, and I have a presence no matter what, even if it's just walking into a room, or I was just at the pool with my daughter, and like the children look at me like I'm this big gigantic human being, right? And it's important for me that people stop stop making judgments or views of other people based on appearances and look and everything else. I was raised by a mother who was super like hyper focused on teaching her children to respect women, to fight for equality amongst all genders and all races and all sexual orientation, everything. And so, to have this discussion and to see that there's other people out there, whether it's it's a gay man that happens to have had a bad experience growing up, or it's somebody who was in a fraternity and dealt with drugs, alcohol, and womanizing as a way to kind of instill masculinity in the world. It was really important for me. It was so beautiful to have that conversation and say, you know what, these are some of the things that I have to deal with. I'm a father of a 8-year-old little beautiful girl who, if I have to, I'm going to be masculine. I'm going to be big and bulky and defend her if I have to. But for the most part, I treat everything with kids gloves. And I think if we teach more people that this is the way it should be, that it doesn't always have to be who's the fastest, who's the biggest, who lifts the most weights, or who who drinks the most alcohol, or even worse, who beds the most women. That doesn't necessarily have to be like what makes a masculine man or a person, a man. So for me, it was really great to have that conversation, to see other people contribute in that way.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. So, building on agreement and building on that, it's in studying women's studies and creating kind of safe spaces for women to express themselves. It was so great to be in a place where it was about men having the same safe space, because, as you and I even partnered on kind of, as we looked at this course and you decided to make this an offering for Hawthorne Union, I was designing what was going to be women and gender at the same time. Sorry, women and money at the same time. So focusing on how finances affect women. And through partnership in this and looking at ball field, bedroom, and what's the other one? Billfold, and how often men are pressured, or people who identify as men are pressured, or the societal pressures that they face. It's different pressure, but it's not just a cakewalk. And, a lot of my clients identify as male. And then also just helping me kind of, when we talk about empathy, the ability to see the perspective from someone else's shoes. And when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, looking at, there was one of the quotes in the class, David and I were in the same class. He didn't interpret it in the same way as I did. And he had a very different, and Jesse, for you too, right? He had a very different interpretation than I think you and I did. And I think that's the beauty of learning, is just the different ways that people come in. So I think it's so important to have spaces where we can learn from each other. And I think that there's a kind of there's often an underestimation of the roles that allies play. And, having a safe space for men just as men, but then also having a safe space for men to, as you support others in your lives, be they spouses or daughters or coworkers or people that you're managing, is really important. So I've learned a lot. I've continued to learn a lot. And I feel like it really makes me a better coach and a better leader.
Yeah. Yes to all the above, right? For sure. Because I was blessed, obviously, with the opportunity to experience alongside each of you, each of your sections. And I think one of I come away changed every time, every experience. And this is a course that is at the heart and soul of my life's purpose. This is my thing, and it changes me every single time to experience this with the folks who attend, to understand and see, be a witness to the transformational change that can occur on an individual level, as people are looking to also skill build in their path towards helping others, supporting others. They're looking to put tools in the toolbox, and they get that, and they get this wonderful, beautiful, powerful awareness of a little better understanding of their perspective on masculinity, the good, maybe the not so good, also get opened up to other people's perspectives, and perspectives from across the spectrum of life experiences. It's incredible. And I feel like I've grown each and every time, personally, as a coach, as a facilitator, the whole shebang. I walk away a changed person each time, and I couldn't be more grateful for that. So I'd also, next question, hard right turn. We're going to keep it moving, right? Next question is the next layer. How are your takeaways from this course? How have they been applicable in your life, in your coaching practice?
So for me, I'm not a coach yet. It's something that I've thought about doing. I would say that I'm more of I would say I'm more of a leader that likes to mentor and help others, right? And I think about this not just at work. I think about it at home. I think about it at the gym. I think about it at the restaurant, wherever it is that I'm at. Like, how can I show up to be my most authentic self, but also respect and really appreciate the people that are around me. So, I'll give a specific example there. I was dealing with a entry level type of salesperson at my company, and there was another kind of mid level, more seasoned veteran in sales, and they were definitely not hitting it off in the right way. She the entry-level salesperson, and he, the more seasoned vet, I guess you could say, just didn't agree on certain things. And I did pull him aside and made sure that he thought about the communication styles and the way that he was talking with her, and being able to understand kind of that dynamic, because of the fact that it can be really easy for somebody who's and I don't want to be ageist, but who's older, to maybe talk down to somebody who's in a more, who's younger. So that was one thing. And also, obviously thinking about gender and equality and equity within an organization was super important. So, yeah.
So in my coaching, I use assessments. And the reason that I use assessments is that it's helpful for creating awareness for the person taking the assessment, but it's also helpful for me as a coach to figure out, okay, what's their lens? What are some potential triggers, some potential strengths, some potential blind spots? And, with that awareness, I feel like we ask different questions and we're better able to show up and support people. And so I really feel with Authentic Masculinity, this is not, other than Jesse, your journey, this is not necessarily a class that as a female course designer would have occurred to me. And so the creation of kind of, hey, how are we looking at these from these angles? What issues are you looking at as men? How are we including other genders and perspectives in that, but also making sure that, there are pressures that men face that women don't, and vice versa, and I think sometimes people can get caught up in more than who's facing more or less. And, obviously, it's important to address the pain that's coming up for people and making sure we're focused on equality, but it also doesn't mean that it's a cakewalk elsewhere. And I think for me, in being more focused on the experiences of women and people of color, that focusing on the, experience of men was not necessarily part of my awareness, not necessarily in a negative or a discriminatory way, but I don't think that I was the best coach that I could be without realizing that, hey, men face a different kind of body pressure, a different kind of financial pressure, a different kind of pressure in the workforce. It's just different shades and maybe from a different angle. So I do really feel like there was a richness there in me just looking at things from a different perspective, because, it's important that we look at things from different perspectives.
On my end, my biggest takeaways really stemmed from my personal life, but they started to feed back into my professional life as well. So explaining that is that as you kind of dig into authentic masculinity, for me, it really started from within, because I really had this vision that I really had to break typical male stereotypes, right? I really had to be understanding and really self-aware. And as you do this work and as you start learning emotional intelligence and kind of understanding personality assessments, it was almost a sort of elitist pride that, no, I'm beyond all that stuff. I don't check those male boxes. And even in my personal relationship, I prided that, that my partner, my wife, she's very, very headstrong and she has her own professional career. So when we get into arguments like, hey, who's going to take out the trash? The trash, that's a boy's job. I say, oh no, we don't do that here. We don't split up chores like that. To learn that when we're talking about things like equality, doesn't mean exactly the same, doesn't mean identical one for one. And that you sort of slip and slide, right? You have this blend of both. Sometimes you fall into those stereotypes and you're aware of them. And sometimes you fall outside the lines. And that blend is really what makes you an authentic male, authentic masculinity, which I really like that. So what I was noticing with my friends is that when I noticed some of those traits that we would talk about in class, and I'd see it in other people, or see those things that I didn't like about myself that I wanted to defy in other people, is that my tolerance for it became very, very low at first, until we started processing with the class and realizing that's a trap, that's a trigger, because that's something I'm working on. And so I'd see it in other people. And so as that progressed and I started to recognize that, I became a lot more empathetic to my friends that were just on a different journey or were just a different level of awareness. And that fed back into my journey as a coach to be able to be that much more effective. And the example that initially from a personal perspective would be, as someone who worked with a lot of female professionals, when a female professional said, I'd rather work with a female coach, I would take that personally. I'm like, what? I'm nice. I'm understanding. I'm progressive. I get it. Whereas now I don't sweat that. I said, no, I totally get it. You need someone that you can identify with. Or if I was coaching a male and they would start saying something that would impact me, I would immediately want to address that or dive and dig and break it apart. But I let the own person have their own journey. And sometimes those things come up if someone's ready to address it as being a very effective coach. And if they're not, I hold the space and work with what they have and let my own desire as an individual wanting to work on those things that I see in my clients. If they're not ready to address it, then I hold the space when they are, rather than wanting to influence as a coach's agenda, which is kind of counterintuitive to the ICF way. So that's what I've taken away and applied from the class.
Interestingly enough, of course, I as is kind of on brand, I work with mostly men, right? Not necessarily an accident. I do work with females and enjoy it and wouldn't get away from it. I work with mostly men. My perspective, there's some affirmation of my willingness to go there a little bit when it comes to some of the more emotional things. And the class raised my awareness of maybe not holding even in an interior sense as much judgment of guys who weren't ready to go there. Like remembering, first off, not to, it's a little bit of like an imposition of how I think they should be, right? If I'm going in there and I'm diving in and I'm like, well, come on, come with me to this emotional place where they're maybe not ready to go yet. And just similar to what Jason said, respecting where they are in the journey. And understanding that they'll get there if they're going to get there, and they won't if they won't. But that doesn't make them less of a person, have less value, have less ability, less this, that, or the other. It's not less than at all. It's just they're on a different path, maybe. But affirmed for me the depth, width, and breadth of what can show up with men. That it's not just the superficial level. It's not just the checklist. What can we get done? The men are actually more comfortable sometimes than even I give them credit for, being willing to dive into the being and the emotion. Who are you being? What's your perspective? How does it feel? And things like that. So it's just really affirmed some things, challenged me in some ways, and then broadened my perspective in some other just beautiful, challenging ways as well. And who doesn't like to be challenged, right? That's what we get out of bed in the morning. So, last question to the group. Juicy, give me the tea, I think the kids say, right? I'm probably totally misused that. It doesn't matter. How did this class change? The tea, dog, the tea, like drink the tea. All right. How did the class change your perspective on masculinity?
I don't think the class changed my perspective of masculinity because, it's something that I've always had a mindset around, and something that's been in the back of my mind. I think that what it did was it enabled me to discuss it, to talk about it, to have an open forum in order to, hear other people's experiences, male and female, in order to understand where other people are coming from and to think about things a little bit differently than what I normally think of, right? For example, you just spoke about how, like, it's interesting how sometimes you're trying to coax people and pull people to get into this really emotional space. Yet, being masculine is all about not having being masculine in society is all about not having that vulnerability. So you're asking them to be less of what we've grown to think of as masculinity in society by pulling them in. And you know what I mean? It's like that reciprocating, that circular kind of thought process. And sometimes it takes a village, right? And I think you're doing a really great job with that. And that's one of the things that I really appreciated about it, and why I'm so happy to be able to contribute to anything else that you're doing, even if I don't talk like this.
That's hilarious, David. You should always talk like that, though.
I will.
I think when you go through the class, one of the things that is very easy to start taking away, especially after the second class, is that when you identify with a certain group, right, whether it's gender, race, religion, region, whatever it is that because you're so connected to it, you sort of have this filter that you put out that the experience of a man or masculinity is like this singular experience that everyone kind of conforms to. But when you start expanding the topic, you realize it's this huge variance that can all be, it's all good, right? Whether or not I have as strong as muscles as David, or I've gone to a fraternity and have this huge network of other like really strong professional men. If I don't have those things, that doesn't make me more or less of a man. It's just different. And part of that is what makes this topic so exciting, because it's through all those differences that you don't become this echo chamber. You start talking about the different experiences to enhance your own. And I really like that, because it's also made my lens on where other people identify with other people in my life, or other clients that I work with, when they identify with a certain category or group, that their experience may be very different from what society expects. And I do believe that's probably what's next on the docket, is that as we start of doing this work of redefining the experience of masculinity and what that means to be a man, as we expand upon that, we have made a lot of progression, but there's still plenty of work to do, because when you think of how you describe a man versus a woman, those things are pretty consistent from way back in the day. And those are the things that we need to break down next in terms of characteristics, and just in general, how you talk in terms of men and women, or how we describe men and women. But those things are now up for grabs, up for debate. And I really appreciate that. And I want to keep working on that. So thanks for that, expanding that perspective for me, Jesse.
Yeah, it added additional depth and nuance. You know, it's fascinating to see. I don't know if you said to a woman, like, be a woman, I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean anything. I mean, I do think it probably, when it comes to reproductive abilities. So it's just interesting to see how these things that they're so often similar, they're just applied in different ways. So I think just the nuance and the experience. I mean, Hawthorne Union's tagline is "We're better together, join us." And, you know, as we think about from a diversity perspective, it was helpful for me to hear a diversity of perspectives. And then from kind of inclusion and equity, it's just kind of giving that space, you know, even Jesse, what you said, you know, that you love to be challenged, and why else do you wake up in the morning? There are people who do not agree with you, right? That's not how they live. And so often I think we see from our own perspective, and, you know, it's the whole golden rule, treat others how you want to be treated. But then the idea of the platinum rule, treat others as they want to be treated. And so it was very illuminating for me to step into an environment where I was, you know, I think being a minority in the environment is helpful. It's educational, you know, it's a different perspective. But I also just think that I now have greater awareness for the men that I support, both personally and professionally. So it was just really, it was illuminating. And I think it's really important, like, as we move through, and, you know, I know also we took this before COVID, and I think, or maybe during COVID, and just even how much that stretched every person in different ways. Obviously some groups more than others, based on whether race or socioeconomic status. And, you know, I think as we also look at kind of not just gender, but, you know, what does it mean for someone to stand up tall? And I think that you've really created a space to figure out, like, we've talked about masculinity today, but we haven't talked as much about authenticity. But you've created a space to say, who are you? Who do you want to be? Right? What's the gap or disconnect between who you are and who you want to be? And then how do you move towards that courageously? and with kind of courageous vulnerability. So you've really modeled that in the sharing of your story and your kind of checkered past, as you call it, but really the way that you show up and lead with your clients and with others as a leader and as a coach, but especially with men, I think is really inspiring. So it's just an inspiring part of the experience and learning from you, but then also learning from the other people in the class, because everyone's bringing a different perspective. And I would say for a lot of people, they maybe don't discuss these topics. You know, I know maybe that's not like, I know David has done extensive reading and it's really important. I know other people are in men's groups and things like that. But, you know, for some people in the class, this is the first time that they're ever talking about these things. And I think that's important.
Yeah.
You know, to touch upon that real quick, Jesse, I think that one of the, I wish that there was more, that I wish that more people had seen this or are able to take this class, because, you know, there's so many men out there that defend the actions of others without ever realizing that they're doing it, by just saying, oh, it's not everybody. It's not every guy that does that. It's not every man that acts like that. Yet, if you take a look at how many times, you know, there's been a sexist or a racist or a, you know, a joke that belittles, you know, somebody's sexuality or something along those lines, you know, just saying the joke, even if it's not, you know, somebody's real opinion of it, it's contributing to that kind of, that mentality. It's contributing to what's wrong with the world right now. And I think it goes both ways. You know, it's not just about men instilling their toxic masculinity. It's also about, you know, everyone, male, female, his, hers, she, them, whoever it is, instilling that kind of pressure and bullying to conform to what their beliefs are, or conform to what they want to present, in order to get other people to see their way. And that's really the crux of what we're talking about here, I think, in my opinion. So.
Yeah. Interesting that you bring that up, not in a bad way, but in a good way, because a lot of what I thought about my perspective on it, just thinking about the, you know, being a certain way, conforming to a certain way, you know, to borrow and maybe paraphrase a little bit, borrow a phrase from Bruce Lee, like, this is the way of no way, in a sense, right? In a sense, you know, and this class has really helped me understand so many individualized perspectives on masculinity, and that as long as it's healthy and it's not stepping on somebody else's rights, it's not, you know, within certain bounds, obviously, but if it's healthy for you to express your healthy expression of masculinity, then it's welcome. And it's probably really actually super incredibly needed. Right. And so just understanding the individuality of masculinity, and the encouragement that we can all bring. There's so many people that are actually on the same page that just might not be able to articulate it, or might not be able to button down that this is
that's huge. Yeah.
Feeling. This can put a fine point on it for folks, and help them step into their authenticity, step into who they were created to be, to who they truly are in their heart of hearts, right? To understand that in some ways, right, there's space for exploration around the idea that sort of this is what it is to you, right? Masculinity, in a sense, is such an individualized thing. It's not an 8.5 by 12 portrait picture, you know, from the 30s, right? This is a little bit of it. What it is to you. And there are a lot of things, definitely, that there are things that aren't bad about traditional masculinity, but dadgummit, that is a box. I'm in a box on Zoom right now. That's the only box I'm in. Yeah. I'm not in this masculine box. I'm not in the male box. None of us are, right? We are who we were created to be. And when we can embolden people to embrace that and step into it more fully in normal life, then they can be positive disruptors on behalf of the call to authenticity in the entire universe, right? And we can kind of raise the level for everybody. All right. Got fired up for a second there. Last question.
I love it.
Yeah.
Bonus question. Excited, right? Bonus question. One sentence. Well, David, 7 sentences. One sentence. Why should someone take this course?
Learn more, be better.
If you can change one person, it'll be worth it, even if that one person is yourself.
This course will change the way you view masculinity, femininity, and other types of existence.
Yeah.
And if I have more to say about that, I'm going to.
Good job limiting us, Jesse. Did you want to talk a little? Well, we want to hear your sentence, but also if you want to talk a little bit about who this course is for.
Yeah. Yes. And right. So my sentence, right. You should take this course because you will have the opportunity to grow a skill set, to be able to support the masculine people in your life. It will also increase your awareness and your consciousness of who you are, and empower you to live from that place of authenticity as well, while still supporting others in discovering and living out their authenticity. And this course, this course is designed to help skill build in nuanced and powerful ways. The toolkits that we as helping professionals, this could be coaches, this could be psychiatrists, psychologists, this could be teachers, this could be volunteer supports in organizations that work with men or boys, right? This course is designed to help you build skills to support men, young men, old men, whomever, across the age spectrum, across the experience, identity spectrum, help support them in uncovering their authenticity and being comfortable with their authentic masculinity, the thing that they were born with, being who they are, who they're created to be, who they choose to be. And this is designed to help flesh out your skill set there, as well as just help you level up your own awareness and step into who you are really designed to be as well, right? There's learning all around, value all around.
Okay. Thank you. Any closing?
Oh, Ollie's fired up about it too, man. My enthusiasm contagious in the Trout house. I think you guys.
Ooh, let the dogs out.
Who?
Okay, I'm stopping the recording.
Oh, man.
Oh, you're stopping